When you want something now, later won't cut it. Download GoPuff now and order in seconds for delivery in minutes, all for a flat fee of $1.95. GoPuff, make now good.
I'm a cover girl.
I'm a cover girl.
I'm a cover girl too, because I use CoverGirl Simply Ageless Liquid Foundation.
America's #1 anti-aging foundation brand.
Simply Ageless is skincare and makeup in one.
It instantly reduces the look of wrinkles and even skin tone.
With hyaluronic complex and vitamin C for plump skin and a healthy youthful glow.
So be a cover girl like me.
And me.
And get better skin at any age.
Try Simply Ageless Liquid Foundation.
From easy, breezy, beautiful,
CoverGirl.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 409. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy Wednesday. Almost to Friday. And if you're in California, well, them stay-at-home lockdown orders are gone. Now, for me, I find that to be fantastic because living next door in Nevada, California has some of the most primo campgrounds in the whole entire country, and I was dying not being able to go to Joshua Tree and Yosemite and some of the other places I like to visit in California. So I'm really glad that this lockdown order has been lifted. It has to be a sigh of relief for the people living in California that want to, get back to work and start trying to get some sort of semblance of normalcy back. So that's definitely a solid occurrence in my opinion. I really need to get out to Joshua Tree. It's been over a year now since I've been out there, and that's way too long. I'm usually out there 3 or 4 times, 5 times a year at least. So I'm starting to get withdrawals from some of my favorite campgrounds in California. So with this stay-at-home order being lifted, I'm pretty pumped to get on my traveling shoes and take a nice trip to a nice secluded area of Joshua Tree, Death Valley, Yosemite, Grand Sequoia, all of it. So pumped about that for sure. And I'm already in the middle of planning a trip out to Joshua Tree when it reopens fully, the campgrounds. So at first they said something like February 17th, but they've revised that already, and it's going to be sooner than that. So it gives me a little bit of time to plan and get my stuff together logistically to get a trip like that going. And, of course, I'll be broadcasting the show from wherever location I end up. I'll make sure that I find at least a hotspot for Wi-Fi to do, the usual 1 or 2 shows a day at the very least. So, and for those of you who are into my picture taking and stuff like that, obviously I'll be taking a ton of pictures on these adventures. All right, so show-related stuff. This weekend, obviously on Sunday, we're going to do our usual live stream. And this Sunday, it'll be at its usual 7 p.m. start time. Now, the Sunday following that, we're going to start at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That way, folks in some different time zones can be involved if they want to jump in and join the conversation. So be on the lookout for that. This weekend, the usual time of 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And then next weekend, look for the show on Sunday, the live stream, to be a bit earlier with a 2 p.m. start time. All right, so that's enough of that stuff. Let's talk about our article for this evening. And we have an article tonight from OK Magazine, and Mr. Chris Spargo, once again, is all over things, doing a fantastic job of covering this case. I mean, it seems like every time we turn around, OK Magazine is scooping all of the other big outlets, is, dropping another fantastic article to add context to a murky situation. So if you folks aren't following Chris Spargo yet, or checking out all of his work, I think that you should do that. He definitely deserves the clicks, no doubt about it, and the follows on Twitter or wherever you guys get your media on social media. So definitely make sure that you're checking out his other work and getting notifications and stuff like that, because this is fantastic stuff, right? He has been really going hard in the paint, and there's enough of these so-called journalists that run around like a bunch of knuckleheads, right? And if we're going to bash them when they do a shitty job, I think it's only fair that we point out when journalists are doing a good job. And certainly there are a bunch of journalists who have done a good job with this case. It's the legacy media overall that I have a problem with. You know, the ABCs of the world, the CBSs of the world, the NBCs of the world, the MSNBCs of the world, the Fox Newses of the world. All of these resources, more resources than you could possibly imagine. And they're not throwing anything at this case for the most part. Oh, sure, ABC gave us a couple of podcasts, a few episodes. Hey, thanks. How about you release the Amy Robach interview? What do you think? Would that be a good idea? You know how bad ABC is going to look when all is said and done and it comes out that Prince Andrew is a smarmy son of a bitch and a liar? You know how bad ABC and Disney are going to look when it comes out that they quashed this story so that they could continue to have access to these royal deviants. Boy, talk about a black eye. They're worried about Gina Carano's character in The Mandalorian. They're going to have a lot bigger problems coming down the pipe, folks. And that's not even to mention George Stephanopoulos, their number one guy, their top newscaster. Well, why was he hanging out at Jeffrey Epstein's house as well? Anybody going to ask him that? I wish Rand Paul would have asked him that during that interview, or anybody, in fact, that's interviewed by Stephanopoulos. You know, he's one of these ivory tower guys. Lives on top of the ivory tower, shouts down at the rest of us, tells us, you know, how life should be and how everybody's a terrible, unwashed, disgusting plebeian. Yeah, that's the kind of person Stephanopoulos is. Meanwhile, he's cavorting and hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein. Go figure. So, again, not all journalists, obviously, are you know, in the bag for Epstein. There's been a lot of journalists at a lot of different outlets that have done fantastic work in this case. And Chris Spargo certainly is one of them. So let's jump into this article by Chris Spargo over at OK Magazine, and let's see what's going on. All right, so the headline revealed how Jeffrey Epstein deposition sabotaged Ghislaine Maxwell's sex case. This article was authored by Chris Spargo. The relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell was permanently fractured after the pedophile sabotaged her chance to dismiss the defamation suit filed against her in 2015 by Virginia Roberts. So, again, context. It goes to show you what we've talked about here from pretty much the very beginning. It's all about making sure that you come out of it unscathed. And I mean Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. It's all about self-preservation with these people. Friendship be damned. Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were not as close of friends as people make it out. Sure, they were close business associates, and they were riding on each other's back and living a symbiotic, parasitic relationship with one another, no doubt about it. But friends? Come on, that's a long, long stretch, and a very liberal use of the word, in my opinion. Jeffrey Epstein was not worried about friends. Jeffrey Epstein was worried about the consolidation of power and making sure he stayed out of prison. And if that meant Ghislaine Maxwell's chances got harpooned, then so be it. What, you thought this dude actually cared about anybody but himself? Maxwell assumed that Epstein would back up everything she said, according to court documents, and therefore spent the trial denying that she and her former pedophile paramour had ever raped Virginia Roberts, despite the growing mound of evidence and photographs being presented in court by their young survivor. So, while Ghislaine Maxwell is denying all of this stuff, the evidence was mounting that it was all actually the truth. And Jeffrey Epstein, well, he wasn't providing her any help at all. He wasn't providing her anything, right? He was in self-preservation mode. You ever see the movie Open Water, when the two scuba divers, they get left by the tour that they're on and they're stuck in the middle of the water and a shark shows up and they're doing, grab onto whatever they can to survive, to float, right? Hang on to the life preserver, hang on to each other, whatever it is, just as long as they're not the one to get dragged under. And that's what you're seeing here with Jeffrey Epstein during this deposition. He wasn't going to cop to anything. He wasn't going to admit to anything that might have it so he gets prosecuted. Did she really think that he was going to say that it was him and not her, or take the fall for her? Zero chance that was ever going to happen. And once again, what it does, it gives you another glimpse behind the scenes. These two were not as close as people try to make it out to be. When they say friendship or that they were lovers, that's not what it was. This was a business relationship that was facilitated by some very powerful, very rich people. Robert Maxwell being one of them. The strength in numbers approach collapsed fantastically, however, when Epstein was summoned to give his deposition in the case. Over the course of a few hours, Epstein was asked a litany of questions about his relationships with Maxwell and Roberts, the allegations at the center of the case, and his own felony conviction just a few years prior in Palm Beach. So, when they had Epstein in there, they were asking him all kinds of questions during this deposition. And just like I said, it was, dog-eat-dog world kind of situation. Me against the world. It's all about me. I have to make sure I don't go down for these crimes. I told you that's what was going on behind the scenes. I knew that Jeffrey Epstein wasn't out there throwing no life preservers for Ghislaine Maxwell or anybody else. The dude was a self-serving narcissist, and the only thing he cared about was the consolidation of his power and scratching his disgusting needs. And they both went hand in hand. And the people that were looking the other way and the people that were funding him, boy, oh boy, I don't know how they live with themselves. The questions changed, but Epstein's answer stayed exactly the same as he shouted out fifth time and time again, referencing his right to not testify under the Fifth Amendment. In her own deposition, Maxwell accused Roberts of spreading many fictitious lies and stories to make this a salacious event. To get interest and press, it's absolute rubbish. So while Epstein was pleading the fifth, and not incriminating himself and not using any sort of language that could be turned around and used to catch him in a perjury trap, Maxwell, on the other hand, is out there saying these are lies, these are stories that were made up, this is all to get the press involved, perjuring herself. And we see that with the charges that the prosecution has brought against her. Her big mouth is what got her indicted with those perjury charges. All of this whole entire, group defense that they had going on here, the strength in numbers approach, as Chris puts it, fell apart. Because guess what? It was never a strength in numbers approach for Jeffrey Epstein. That dude has always been an army of one. Everybody else was just a tool to be used. Ghislaine Maxwell, Khan, Indike, everybody around him was a tool to be used. What did Tywin Lannister say? Every job has a tool, and every tool has a job. And that was most certainly the way Jeffrey Epstein went about his life. Everybody was looked at as a tool. My whole life revolved around just pleasing these men and keeping Ghislaine and Jeffrey happy. Their whole entire lives revolved around sex, said Roberts in her own deposition. She also detailed how, within minutes of arriving to Epstein's home for the first time, she was ordered to strip naked and, God, disgusting to even say. Sickens me to say stuff like this, folks. And orally stimulate the pedophile. I mean, wow. And now, let's remember, this is a deposition, a court-given deposition. Virginia isn't just saying this, in some chat room or something. This is documented by the courts. This is said under oath with the threat of perjury hanging over your head. And now that we have some hindsight to guide us as we try to look back at these events as they unfolded, well, it's rather obvious who has been telling the truth and who has been lying this whole entire time. And I haven't even gotten to the photographs yet. We put that shit in the past a long time ago. Those were verified by the photographer from New Zealand and the FBI themselves. Well, now there's more pictures that have been entered into the realm of public view. And we're going to talk about that article tomorrow morning, but that should just go ahead and smash the whole entire nonsensical theory that these pictures aren't real. And once that theory gets smashed, then the people who are defending Andrew are really left with nothing. And their whole entire narrative turns to ash in their mouth. Maxwell did not seem to handle these developments well, and soon found herself begging the judge for Epstein's deposition. If compelled to truthfully answer the questions posed regarding the plaintiff, Mr. Epstein's testimony will support Miss Maxwell's position in this case. Very interesting. If compelled to truthfully answer the questions posed regarding the plaintiff, Mr. Epstein's testimony will support Miss Maxwell's position in this case. So meaning, if they forced him to be truthful, what he says would support Miss Maxwell, meaning the Serpentino herself, and her position in this case. Well, he pled the fifth, leaving her to wiggle on the vine, no support of her statements. And now he left her in the very dangerous state and the very dangerous country known as perjury. And boy, did they show up to collect taxes. His responses will confirm that Miss Maxwell never engaged in any sexual contact with plaintiff and did not arrange for the plaintiff to have sexual contact with anyone, argued Maxwell in a lengthy filing. So she was hoping that Jeffrey Epstein was going to have the same story, that they were going to stick to the same story and they were going to hammer it home. Well, that did not happen. Jeffrey Epstein, like usual, went off the reservation and probably at the behest of Dershowitz and Left Court came up with this other strategy to plead the fifth and leave Maxwell holding the bag. That's certainly what it seems like. It sure seems like Epstein went in there knowing that Maxwell and him had a strategy that they had hammered out together behind the scenes to have the same story, make sure everything was buttoned up, and roll with that. Well, once they got into the depositions, everything changed. Maxwell stuck with the original plan, while Jeffrey Epstein's up there at the line calling audibles like he's Tom Brady. She went on to state, his responses will confirm that plaintiff was never held as a sex slave for 4 years, nor sexually trafficked to world leaders, heads of state, foreign presidents, Prince Andrew, or Alan, I kept my underpants on, Dershowitz. The allegations that the press statement referred to as obvious lies. Well, Miss Maxwell, What's it like to be left holding the bag, having the hot potato? When the cards all come tumbling down, you're the one that they're landing on. You're not so smart after all, are you? Oxford Oxington. Things seem to be good between the two, based on an email exchange that was sent just before the deposition, and Epstein was likely concerned about the possibility of incriminating himself in that deposition. It was a well-founded fear given the fact that he would be charged just a few years later by the Southern District of New York. So, we know that Epstein and Maxwell had a communication via email that was provided to the court previously. And those two were still talking and who knows what behind the scenes. But it certainly looks like Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell had a plan, and Epstein totally audibled and decided that his self staying out of jail, right, was way more important than sticking to the story and closing ranks with the old Serpentino. Mr. Epstein's refusal to testify truthfully in this manner is prejudicial to Miss Maxwell because the truth fully exonerates her. Mr. Epstein previously has acknowledged that Miss Maxwell was not involved in any criminal activity, but now, improperly, refuses to answer questions that are critical to a fair resolution of this case, whined Maxwell's defense team. That's called being used as a scapegoat. And if anyone had any doubts that Jeffrey Epstein was willing to throw anyone under the bus, was willing to burn any bridge, those doubts should be alleviated by this. Jeffrey Epstein's plan the whole entire time was to plead the fifth and let Maxwell do the incriminating of herself. He was never going to, what did you think, someone like Jeffrey Epstein's going to accept responsibility for his behavior and his activities? Zero chance. It is Mr. Epstein's burden to demonstrate that his invocation of the Fifth Amendment privilege is proper. He must demonstrate an actual possibility of prosecution, and unless that burden is met, he should be compelled to testify. Well, I don't know how you can compel somebody to testify if they plead the fifth. I mean, that's what it's there for, so you don't incriminate yourself. Now, once you plead the fifth, you're pretty much giving up the battle and the war in the public sphere. But you're saving yourself from incriminating yourself. So it certainly is pick your poison, right? And Jeffrey Epstein, he didn't give a damn toss about what the public thought about him. He wanted to stay out of prison. And if that meant bagging Ghislaine Maxwell, then so be it. Look, Jeffrey Epstein was on paper. There's no doubt in my mind that he was cooperating with authorities at some point for something. And I wonder where that proffer agreement is. I'm sure it's somewhere. Or maybe it disappeared with the year of emails. Maybe it just happened to disappear. You know, more bad judgment. Maxwell and her attorneys did not seem too interested in the truth either in their filing, stating at one point, he entered a guilty plea pursuant to a plea agreement that included all the offenses that were known or investigated by the state of Florida and the United States Attorney through 2007. There were close to 40 victims in Palm Beach, and most of the cases and offenses were quickly dropped. So yeah, there was never, look, what happened in Palm Beach is an absolute travesty. I don't know how many ways I can describe how much of a travesty it was, what happened down there. And I'm of the mind that all of the people involved need to be held accountable. All of the people who worked for the prosecution should be held accountable. And if any of them still have federal jobs, they should lose those jobs. If people are losing jobs for showing up at protests and all of the other stuff, hey, look, you most certainly should be losing your job here as well. From there, Maxwell and her lawyers once more asked the court to compel Epstein's testimony before closing out their brief. Mr. Epstein should be required to testify fully in this matter because He is immune from prosecution by agreement, he is immune from prosecution by operation of his guilty plea, and any statute of limitation has expired relating to activities purportedly occurring over 14 years ago. They're basically admitting that he was a pedophile and a pervert right here, folks. That's what they're doing. And they're saying, haha, because the statute of limitations is gone, F you. So again, the technicalities. Not that he's innocent, not that none of this never occurred, but haha, you can't get me because the statute of limitations have run out. I'm sure that makes all of you feel nice and warm inside like me. Actually, it makes me want to vomit. In the end, Epstein did not give a second deposition, but both he and Maxwell found themselves behind bars despite their efforts to not incriminate themselves. And that's what happens when you do not have the truth on your side. When you're playing games and you're manipulating things and you're trying to use technicalities and loopholes and you're not innocent, eventually this shit catches up to you. If the prosecution goes after you the correct way and they use the vigor and the zeal they use to go after common folk, then somebody like Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell should never, ever be able to get away with the crimes that they got away with for so long. And now that all of these chickens are coming home to roost, watch and see all of these people begin to turn on each other and rat each other out as they try and keep themselves from going to prison for the rest of their lives. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. And like I said earlier, I'm trying to get through all of the emails. There's a bunch of them. They're backed up. So if I haven't responded to you in the last week or so, I apologize. And I'm trying to barrel through those by the end of this weekend. All right, everybody, enjoy your Wednesday, and I will be back tomorrow.
Things I thought could never happen. Me in a punk band?
What?
We Are Lady Parts, a new original comedy streaming only on Peacock.
A confused mix of hash anthems and sour girl power. Syra, vocals. Aisha, drummer. Bisma, bassist. Mumtaz, band manager. And me, Amina, lead guitar.
You were really good until you puked all over the front row. Ew.
We Are Lady Parts, all episodes streaming now. Only on Peacock. Streaming only on Peacock.
John Wayne Gacy is suspected of having killed as many as 32.
Straight from the killer's mouth.
They want you to believe that I alone committed these murders.
The new gripping 6-part documentary series that investigates the crimes that shocked the nation.
The thing everybody thought they knew wasn't the whole story.
John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise. All episodes streaming now.
Devil in Disguise.
Only on Peacock.